23rd Annual Northwest Interlibrary Loan and Resource Sharing Conference. Today's date is September 21st, 2023. Today's session is a combination of two presentations. Cherie Weible and Janelle Sander from University of Illinois at Urbana, Champaign are sharing leveraging the student workforce, getting the best from student employees. And from Vanderbilt University, Miriam Wanick, Robin Wiseman, and Bailey Skagen. Oh, Bailey Skogan. Skagen. Skogan. Oh my God. Thank you.
You are totally fine.
Okay. Thank you, though. It's important to get it right. They're presenting on their presentations called Student Assistant Training, Management, and Empowerment. My name is Summer Steele, and I'm the convener for this session. The session is being recorded with permission from the presenters, but because they retain the copyright to the information they're presenting, they may choose to request its removal from public viewing in the future by written request and law. At this time, however, it's planned that recordings will be made available once captions have been added. Attendees will be notified when recordings are available. To turn live captioning on, click the closed captioning CC link at the bottom of your screen and select Show Subtitles. If you have any questions for the presenters during the session, please use the Q&A function in Whova, and I will pose these questions to the presenters at the end of their presentation. We will not be monitoring the chat for questions, but if you're having technical difficulties, go ahead and put it in there, and one of NWILL's conference committee members will help you. And when the presentation ends, please complete the post-session survey in Whova located on the conference homepage and the session chat. NWILL and presenters really use and appreciate the feedback. And on that note, I will turn the session over to our presenters.
Hi, well, I'm going to jump in first here. I'm Cherie Weible, as Summer said, and I'm going to share my screen. So Summer, it says it's going to discontinue your screen here. And let me share mine. Let's see if we can get this going here. Does everyone see my presentation here?
Yes.
All right. So here we are. And as Summer pointed out, this is a combined session. So we're all going to tell you fun things about hiring students at the University of Illinois as well as at Vanderbilt. One thing I hope you'll get from this is that we're all kind of different places. And so hopefully you'll pick up something in somebody's presentation here today that will help you with your student hiring and training and onboarding, all those fun things. So first, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about our environment. The University of Illinois at Urbana, Champaign. On the left, you see 3 of our libraries. The top picture is our main library. And we have several departmental libraries within that building. So it does hold our main stacks, which is about 1/3 of the collection, as well as international studies and social sciences, history, philosophy, newspapers. So there's a lot of libraries within that building. The middle picture is our Funk ACES library, and that mostly serves the south part of campus agricultural needs. And then the lower left is our Granger Engineering Library. The two ACES and engineering are much newer, and engineering serves a lot of our northern part of campus. So we're a very spread out place. Everybody does things a little bit different for hiring. And so I'm going to tell you today about what we do when it is time to hire new students. So again, here on our campus, we have about 55,000 undergraduate students. Very proud of the fact that we have our largest undergraduate enrollment ever this year. So that's almost 9,000 undergraduate students that came in this year. My department is Central Access Services. My co-presenter today, Janelle Sander, is the Patron Services Manager. I'm the head of the unit, and we employ numerous students all over the area. So that comprises central circulation, book stacks, interlibrary loan, interlibrary borrowing, central discharging, and central billing. We have a very large wage budget for our hourly employee needs, and that runs over $250,000 a year. We use that to employ undergraduate students or graduate students. You may have options to hire work study students. We do here, though we're not required to focus only on those who have work study, but it is a way for us to leverage our budget should we need to. So we get turnover, everyone gets turnover. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges really with hiring and the environments we work in, because we know that this is an ever-changing workforce with ever-changing needs. So I think it's important to really recognize, what is your environment? What's your environment at your local institution? What constraints do you have? What challenges do you have? And being able to pivot in order to meet those needs for your employment situation. Our turnover mostly happens due to graduation in the spring. That's the largest time when a lot of students leave. And so we don't need to have as many students on during the summer. It's a quieter time. That is one thing we've really noticed post-pandemic. Before, we would have students who would want to stay and work during the summer, and that seems to be a little bit more difficult to manage now, because people are really wanting to take advantage of being able to be off for the summer. But we do get lucky. We find those students who want to do earn those hours, earn that paycheck. So really it's late summer, early fall is a prime time for most of our hires. And of course that in and of itself is a little bit stressful, because that's also when it's very, very busy. People are coming to campus, everyone's returning. So a few other factors will lead to turnover. We'll have students who pick up internships. They do study abroad, student teaching. If they've been a good employee, we always tell them we would like to have them back should they find themselves needing employment on campus again. And sometimes they'll return if their schedule allows. Other times with student teaching, it's usually that person's last semester. And so they're pretty much done with being able to work on campus. All right. So the beginning of this process, of course, is hiring and advertising. And what you want to do is obtain a pool of candidates, hopefully a good, robust pool of candidates. So where do we advertise? And this has changed over the years, is one of the reasons I'm bringing that up. So we do have a library website that our library human resources runs, and was really promoted as being the place where any of the departments who were wanting to hire students could post a job notice. And we really found that we didn't have our best luck. We weren't getting our best pools. And so there's also a campus-wide website where jobs can be posted. And that has been one of our best ways to get these really good pools. So we currently have an advertisement out. It's on the campus web board. We can take that up or take it down whenever we want to. So it's really nice that if we're not getting a lot of candidates right away, we can leave it up a few more days. If we find out that suddenly we're inundated within the first day with 50 applications and we think, yep, that's probably we'll probably find a few good candidates there, we can take it down right away so that we aren't inundated. And one of the other ways has been through word of mouth. So we might have a student who's just excellent who will say, my roommate's looking for a job, or some of my classmates, some of my course mates are looking for a job. So this is a little bit challenging and a little bit tricky. We have had roommates work together in the past, and it's just like having people who are working in your office who are in a relationship. Sometimes that's advantageous, and other times it can be a challenge. So we do have to be a little bit careful about that. The other times, if we have had a couple of times where we've had a large number of students who have worked, they're all music students. And so they're all needing to go and be away at the same time for the same music events, or the same thing with, we had a group of students from the business college, and they all needed to be away at the same time. So we do try to balance that, although a lot of times that word of mouth can be a really good way to pick up some good candidates. So the next question to ask yourself is, what is it that we really want to advertise? What is the hook? How are we going to get that good pool? So what we advertise, of course, are the days we work. A lot of students are excited about the fact that most of our areas are Monday through Friday. And then what hours of the week we need someone. And right now we need a morning person. So we've been very specific about advertising that in our current job opening that we have. If you have a candidate who has classes from 9 to noon every day, that's not going to work out well for us for this current opening we have. We tell them in the advertisement about the setting. For here in interlibrary loan, we tell them we are a library, and of course that's inside, but because we're interlibrary loan, we have outdoor work. So we have people walking across the campus to the other departmental libraries year round when it's really hot, when it's really wet, like it was earlier today, or when it's really cold. That being said, we do our best to make sure that if it's really hot, we have water in the refrigerator here. We ensure don't hurry today, right? We don't want you going at breakneck speed and making yourself sick. And we provide snacks and other things. We check in with them. We temper the work to the weather as needed. But we do want to let people know up front, if you're applying for one of these jobs, what it actually entails. So we also let them know that we are a high volume environment. It would be like working at a Starbucks or a McDonald's. There's a lot going on with interlibrary loan. It's different kinds of work aspects, if they're shelving books in the stacks or if they're paging slips from the main desk, of course. And finally, we tell them what kinds of tasks are assigned to students so that there isn't any surprise when they get in here for an interview. We talk about preferred skills. Our preferred skills for interlibrary loan are detail-oriented and a fast learner. So I think it's important, what you want to do is make sure that you're advertising properly for the kind of employee that you want. They know what they're getting into as well when they're putting in that application and saying that they'd like to have that interview. So next, with interviewing, we always plan for 30 minutes with a student employee. We really want to get to know the person. Do they have a personality that's going to fit? They can roll with the punches. They can adapt quickly. They understand that we're a busy office. I'm chuckling to myself right now because it's 4:30 here Central Time where I'm at, and it is the end of the shift. And although I have very respectful people, I can hear that door opening and closing as everyone's ending with the day and the carts are going across to our processing area. And we all have to work in a very, very tight space. Again, there's a lot of things that impact that. So some of the questions that we ask, I wanted to read you some of these in case they're helpful. We just ask 4 questions. We say, tell me about your previous work or volunteer experience. What did you like and dislike about it? And we let them talk for a little bit to tell us that, because those answers can really help you get to know the person. They can give you examples of things they've had to deal with. Our second question is, tell me about a mistake you've made, how you took responsibility for it, and what you learned. Again, how people deal with a thing as a mistake. First of all, even being able to admit that and talk about it. Third, tell me about a time you needed to ask for help on a project for school or work and what resources you found most helpful. Again, we're trying to find out a little bit about the person's ability, what kind of learning style they have, and also everyone needs help from time to time. Do you ask for that? And then finally, we asked, tell me about one of your best days at work and what made that day rewarding for you. And then, you listen to those answers. Did they provide thoughtful answers, thorough answers, honest answers? Did they tell you about previous experiences? We recognize that sometimes we get 18-year-olds who've never held a job before. Hopefully they can tell us about coursework or volunteer work, some other experience. And sometimes those are our best answers, where people are being very honest and saying, I've not actually held a paying job before, but I can talk about this situation. And I always appreciate that, right? Because you can tell the person's thinking of how can I best answer this question which is really trying to suss out how is it that I handle these kinds of situations. And then afterwards, we always have people interview with two staff, because you can get some different ways that you get different perspectives on those answers. And then we evaluate those afterwards and what was provided. So finally, of course, you want to find that good fit. I couldn't resist the shirts picture here. Sorry, it felt like it fit the title of my slide. Colorful shirts, and we have all kinds of different students with all kinds of different backgrounds, and that's the way our staff are too. And we all come together, we work together. So we want to take the time in those interviews to find that good fit employee that who fits with our department, and again, shows that flexibility, willingness to learn, and we let them know the same. You're here to be a student. We let them know we're a production type environment, and we let them know a little bit about interlibrary loan. We like to find people that have good customer service skills. We look for people who are able to learn and adapt, and sometimes we can pick that up out of those interview questions. We want people who perform well during an in-person interview, and of course, we always look for enthusiasm. So those are some of the things that we do here to help us get those good student employees. And now, this next slide, I'm going to stop screen sharing and turn it over to Janelle Sander, who's my co-presenter, and she's going to wrap up the second part of our presentation.
Okay, can everyone see my slide? Or can you see the presenter view? Slide.
It looks great, Janelle.
Great, cool. So when it's time to onboard the successful candidates, there are many layers to this process, or there can be, which include working out things with human resources, communication with the employee, and also training. And as we know, each of our institutions has their own hiring process with human resources departments, and Illinois is no different. Within each unit who hires students in central access services, so that would be interlibrary loans, circulation, book stacks, there are people designated to be responsible for each part of the procedure with our library HR department. In addition, there are also 2 to 3 people who can oversee the entire procedure for each unit and can step in at any time to help facilitate the process. We have found this to be especially helpful in situations where the designated person has an unexpected need to be out of the office, or there is turnover in the department. And so as you're thinking about your own situations and maybe how things are handled the same or differently, you may consider asking, is there only one person who handles the process, or are there written instructions for folks to follow if somebody's out of the office? Is there an opportunity for cross-training? Are there directions for the procedure? And through it all, we have found that clear communication with the new hire, the human resources department, and amongst ourselves helps to set everyone's expectations appropriately. But what contributes to clear communication? We often talk about how communication and clear communication is a good thing. But specifically, instructions, clear time frame through which things must be completed. So new hire documentation, possibly meeting with the HR department, going through different things about being hired at the institution, and also information necessary for that first day of work. Are there things that student employees need to know, such as maybe directions to the office where they're going to work, or directions to a place where they can meet someone and walk to the place where they're going to be employed? Do they need information about where to park? What time does the shift start? And will there be breaks or meal breaks? And are they paid? So in addition, we have also found ourselves to be in a more successful situation when we invite the new hire to ask questions that are on their mind. This not only helps to assuage their concerns, it also functions as a way to collect feedback about what information may be helpful to include in future communications with new hires. What information does your department provide before the employees day one? And are there opportunities to incorporate that feedback? Once the students are through the HR hiring process and know when and where to show up for their first day, they are ready to begin training. At Illinois, supervisory staff coordinate training, though often they delegate some of that to other staff who will be working during the same time that the students will be working. This helps allow them to build a rapport through the training process. How do you coordinate training at your institution? Are there areas that need to be revisited to increase staff involvement or incorporate more areas of expertise? We've really found that it's been helpful to have different staff weigh in on different training areas. It helps build that rapport, and it also helps staff share their expertise of certain areas. We have one person who is really excellent at searching for things in the stacks, and so we often have them do a little bit of training to help students who are retrieving know where to go to look in all of the different places that things might be or might be hiding. So the common thread that runs through Central Access Services is that students are trained by staff, but the methods used in each of our departments are different based on the staffing and the physical structure of the unit and the responsibilities that the student is responsible for. One of our units uses a checklist, and every time they get trained on something, it gets marked off and it gets signed by a staff employee to note this student has indeed completed this section of the training. Another unit uses extensive written documentation with little built-in exercises so that they can show that they are able to perform that part of the training before they move on to a different part of the training. So how do you keep track of student training progress at your institution? Would a checklist work? Does it make more sense to have an online tool that helps the project management of making sure a student goes through all of the training material? And another thing I'm going to mention, it might seem pretty obvious, but tailoring the training to match the position is also a key to student success during the onboarding process. For instance, in one of our units, undergraduate students and graduate students can be hired into the same position. So they receive the same training because they're doing the same work. In another unit, undergraduate students and graduate students have different roles. So they receive different training based on the position that they are hired into. And finally, as I wrap up the training portion of the onboarding, I'd like for us to consider if there is anything that needs to wait until after a student is fully trained. And by that, I mean, I'll just give an example. Here at Illinois, students in the Central Circulation Department are allowed to swap shifts with each other if they're not able to show up for one of their shifts. And that might be something that's available at your institution, it might not be. But here in Central Circ, they are. But we would like for them to fully complete the training process before they are allowed to either put a shift up for somebody to take or to take one shift that someone has offered. This is because we would expect that students would be able to know how to do all of the tasks and that we wouldn't have to schedule extra training time with them to be completed during a shift that isn't their own. And so as you think about your own institutions, are there any other things that might need to wait until after training for students to be able to do? So now that we have the students onboarded and they are all trained, we want to try to keep them. There are many ways to retain student employees, and I bet there's a lot of unique things that you all do at your institutions, and I think we're going to hear a lot from Vanderbilt about this. But I'll just mention a few here that we try to incorporate here at Illinois. First, we actively acknowledge that those students are on our campus because they're students first and employees second. And so, as many of you can probably relate, those of us who work in academic environments have schedules that revolve around the academic year, and our student employees feel it at an even deeper level than we do with the ebbs and flows of classes, projects, and exams. And there will be times throughout the semester, midterms, finals, just a couple come to mind, when we can expect that students will need to spend more time on school than library work. So they may ask for some time off, or they may seem a little bit more distracted than normal at their job. And what are some ways we can continue to support them even when we rely on them to help our departments run? One way is to have a clear policy and procedure for letting departments know when the student isn't going to be able to come to work. We know that students will have unexpected absences, whether it's for illness, a personal situation, a class, something else. And so the department is supporting students when a procedure for how to call in an excused absence has been clearly explained, because the student will know what to do when that time comes. Another way to help support students is to help them manage their schedules by not overscheduling them at work. We all have those students every term who say they can work the maximum amount allowed. And while there probably are a few who can consistently handle that throughout the semester or the term, the more likely scenario is that that student is going to get a few weeks in and feel overwhelmed and not be able to commit to all of the hours. So one way that we can handle it is that we can give them a set amount of hours that maybe isn't as many as what they would like, and offer them the opportunity possibly to pick up shifts from other people as a way to sort of pad hours, pad their schedule on a week that they are able to work more. And then on the weeks when maybe they're ill or they have a lot of exams or papers due, then it will also allow them an out so that they are able to work fewer hours on the weeks when they have fewer commitments. Regular communication throughout the academic year will also help with keeping all student employees aware of expectations and important information. And of course, there's various methods of getting the information out. There's email, there's communication apps, there's texting. So it doesn't necessarily matter how the information is going out, although you'd want to stay within your department guidelines for that kind of information and your institutional guidelines for what apps are okay to use. But just the students need to be able to get additional information throughout the semester. So we're not just training them and letting them go. It's a channel that they're able to communicate with us through. And so I'd invite you to consider, what kinds of regular communication do you have with your student employees? And as we come to the close of ongoing support with retention, thinking about your own institutions, where are some areas where student employees can be better supported and how? And think about whether there are clear procedures in place for students when they know that they're going to need to be out of the office. Showing appreciation is a much more fun topic to talk about. So another way to retain students once we've hired them is to acknowledge when we see good work being done. I think we all like to be appreciated for the work we do, and students are not any different. Seeing something done correctly or extra well and saying something about it, whether in person or through an email later, maybe copy in the direct supervisor, it can go a long way. And if there's a way to acknowledge their work formally through a nomination for an award or recognition, that's something that not only helps them feel really good about their work, it can also go on a resume, or it can be helpful in future job interviews. At Illinois, the library does have an Outstanding Student Employee Award for library workers, and then whoever wins that award can go on to the campus level and be nominated for the campus level Student Appreciation Award. So I've outlined here a couple of different ways to show appreciation. Some of them are more formal, some of them are more informal. And I just think that we can be really creative with how we recognize the good work that our students do in the library. Student employees also seem receptive to being shown appreciation with food. Pre-pandemic at Illinois, this is something that we've seen change a little bit actually over time. Pre-pandemic, We provided food appreciation in the way of a potluck every semester. So our institution is on a semester schedule, and we have a thing right before finals week called Reading Day. And so every reading day we would have a potluck, and staff who wanted to would provide food at the potluck, and students could come and eat. And we had, we had a fairly good turnout, although not everyone came. There's also different things we've done in different parts of the unit with games, providing downtime at the end of the semester, and just, kind of a way for students to really relax a little bit while they're going into that final stretch of finals week. And so after the pandemic, we found that students and actually staff too were less likely to want to go into a potluck style environment. And so we kind of switched to a goodie bag idea or having snacks throughout the week. So bringing in prepackaged materials, food that in one part of the unit, we'd put them together in a goodie bag, and then every student got one, and we would just hand them out to students on their last shift of the semester. Other parts of the unit would do just snacks throughout the week, keeping in mind that they are prepackaged, so students didn't feel like if they didn't want to eat around other people, they could take that. And, it's just a little way of saying thank you. So there may be a lot of ways to support student employees at your institution. And so, if there aren't, or if you've heard some things here, what are some other ways that we can start recognizing our good student employees? So we've reached the end of the slideshow. We've discussed some hiring, onboarding, training, and retention strategies that we use in Central Access Services at the University of Illinois. Hopefully you did hear something that you can take back to your institution, and we thank you for coming to the presentation.
Awesome, thanks, Janelle. We will just take a moment and Vanderbilt will get ready for their part of the presentation.
All right, looks like we're good to go. Does everything look all right? Perfect. All right. Hello, welcome from Vanderbilt. We're here. Shalom from Nashville from here at Vanderbilt University. The name of our presentation is Student Assistant Training, Management, and Empowerment. My name is Robin Weissman. I am the Director of Resource Sharing here. I think we can hit next slide. First, give you a table of contents as to how things are set up. We're going to give a brief little introduction as to who we are. We're going to give you a little bit of context as to how things were before the pandemic, how all the plans got blown up that we had for during the pandemic, and how we kind of took the opportunity to innovate and rebuild in the aftermath. Then we're going to go into a little bit of the development of our procedures and practices, and then talk a little bit about the future of what we're going to be doing going forward post-pandemic. So here we are. Again, I'm the Robin Weissman. I'm the Director of Resource Sharing here. I started in July 2018, right before the pandemic, originally from Washington, D.C. And a fun fact about myself is that I will take a selfie with your cat if given the opportunity. So there's that. I'll let my other two coworkers introduce themselves.
Hi, I am Miriam Wanek. I'm the Assistant Manager of Resource Sharing here at Vanderbilt. I'm originally from Seattle, Washington. I started here in December of 2020, and I interviewed and moved 2,000 miles across country, my fun fact, without ever having set foot in the state of Tennessee. And Bailey, you are muted still.
There we are. Hello, everyone. My name is Bailey Scoggin. I am the lending coordinator here at Vanderbilt University, and I started in this department in August of 2021, but I have been at Vanderbilt since about October of 2020, so another COVID hire. And I'm more or less Nashville-less. I've been here the longest, but a fun fact about me is that I have somewhere north of 40 houseplants.
All right, so that is us. And now to give you a little bit of an overview about Vanderbilt University. We are, as of 2020, the 2021 stats, we are about 7,000 undergraduates, about 7,000 graduates, and it's not on the slide, but we're at about currently 1,400 total faculty members. About 16,000 people are kind of our main base of operations that we work with. The libraries are made up of 8 million items located across 7 libraries, including Central Library, which is where we're located, which is pretty much kind of considered the main arts and sciences library, a lot of humanities, and just kind of a basic all around, all different subject areas library. We also have the Stevenson Library, which is science and engineering. We have the Peabody Library, which is our education library, the Blair Music Library, Owen Management Library. There is also the Massey Law Library, which has their own OCLC symbol, TJL. Mad shout out to Ashley Wells, who's out there in the audience. And there's also the Biomedical Library, which has their own symbol, which is TJM. In addition, we have at least 2 offsite storage facilities. There's one just called the Annex. There's one that's focused on special collections. That's in 21 North. And as of July, our special collections is now located at another building offsite in the what's called the 1101 building. There's kind of a debate as to whether that is another library or whether that is another offsite storage facility. They're still trying to figure it out since that move was kind of sudden, and yeah, things are just kind of happening. So it's kind of it's a gray area there with that facility. The resource sharing department is made up of document delivery, which in itself is made up of faculty delivery, scan and deliver, and pull and hold, which is our service to pull books from the stacks for graduate students. Scan and deliver is where we scan articles for pretty much all members of the university community, and faculty delivery is delivery of materials to faculty offices. We also do include ILL, which is borrowing and lending, which really all of you are professionals at. The department is made up of 4 full-time staff and 1 kind of part-time-ish, full-time-ish staff. There's a little bit of restructuring and reorganizing going on. So there's another staff member from another department that's kind of been deployed over here, but they don't officially work over here full-time yet, but it's supposed to be happening. So it's kind of a gray area. We're always innovating here at Vanderbilt University. We are staffed, we have 9 student assistants this semester for cumulative 40 hours. And again, that could vary the amount of students depending on the amount of hours they want to pick up, and depending if we have any special projects, what our needs are, that the amount and the hours that we employ can vary. We are the top kudzu lender. Kudzu is kind of a consortium within ASERL, which is the Association of Southeastern Resource Libraries. And we are the top lender in the kudzu libraries, which we're very proud of, particularly because we're number 1 over a lot of state schools with larger collections and larger staff. So we're very proud to toot our own horns that we're the number 1 lender over the big guys. All right, so pre-pandemic, when I first started in July 2018, we had 8 full-time staff and between 5 to 10 student workers. The first question that I asked when I started was, where's the documentation so that I can get to know a little bit about, this job and what it entails and what it is exactly I'm supposed to do. And it turns out that there was no documentation at all. So that kind of informed, that was the first question I started to ask and where I started to think about how that kind of affects the students, because if there's no documentation for full-time staff, how are we training our students? How are we going about that, in a calculated way? The training was it was almost kind of like ongoing oral history that we were relying upon, where one student kind of trains the other, or kind of like a years-long game of telephone, where the older staff was just kind of passing on orally what was kind of going on, and it was kind of like, there's room for improvement here. That led to the question, again, of how do we train students? In a comprehensive way, and kind of asking the question about documentation led to questions about hiring procedures. Well, if we don't have any kind of documentation for training, how are we hiring students? And the answer to that was, well, they submit an application, and if they respond back, then they kind of are hired. And pretty much if you respond to and are willing to come into the office and do things, then we'll have you. And that's kind of just how things ran. So clearly there was room for innovation going on there. We need to have a clear procedure for hiring students. We need to have clear procedures for training students. And then the next thing that kind of came about was we need to have a procedure for scheduling students, because it became evident very quickly that there was no clear scheduling system. The students kind of came in when they had time or when they felt like it, which made it hard to plan out, when are we going to be doing faculty deliveries? When are we going to be doing, scanning, digitization? It made it hard to plan and strategize, and we didn't really know when we were going to have students around. So those were kind of some of the challenges going in pre-pandemic of kind of what we had to work on. It was additionally daunting because there had been no turnover in the department for over 15 years before I started in July 2018. So there were a lot of old experienced sailors here who were all really great to work with, and I learned a whole lot, but there was also a lot of innovation that needed to happen and a lot of kind of catching up and bringing us. I used to joke around, we need to bring ourselves into the 90s. Not asking a lot, just kind of bring ourselves, let's baby step this. So that was kind of where we were at pre-pandemic. We had additional challenges right before the pandemic. We had 3 retirements, which is not entirely unsurprising given the lack of turnover in, decades. It was about time, people started for the old sailors to, retire. 2 weeks after I started, my director said, "You're doing great, I'm retiring." So we had that going on. We had one staff member move to another department, and none of those positions ended up being filled. We were put on a hiring freeze even before the pandemic. So we started losing a lot of staff, and those positions weren't filled because of the hiring freeze. And the staff that were left were not the staff that were situated for supervising the students. They were kind of more on the borrowing end, processing borrowing requests. And most of our students work more on the document delivery and lending end, like pulling books, scanning, faculty delivery, that kind of thing. So there were those challenges going into it as well. Slide. So at the eve of the pandemic, what we had going on was we got a basic hiring process going. Nothing fancy. It was just, let's sit down. Let's actually call students in for an interview. Let's ask them some basic questions. And the important thing was to explain what this job is and to impart upon them that this is a job. This isn't a job like at a circulation desk where you can kind of sit around and do homework, and as people approach you, then maybe you'll check out a book or something. This is a job where you're going to be busy pretty much your whole shift. You may be doing faculty deliveries, you may be doing scanning, you may be doing book pulling, but you most certainly won't really be having time to do your homework. And that right there, once you go through the interview and explain that, sometimes the students would lose interest. But it's good if they lose interest immediately. You don't want to hire them and have them start and then immediately quit right away once they realize what the job is. Once we had the students started, we got them on set schedules. Previously, the only scheduling that was being done was pencil and paper if the student wanted to give us information as to when they were generally free. Once we got a scheduling system set up so that we would always know when the students were going to be here, so we could anticipate, oh, we'll have time here to do faculty delivery. We're going to have an empty shift here, so we need to prioritize this or that. And kind of set up our day-to-day practice. We did lose one student who thought it was unreasonable that, you know, we should be holding college students to schedules. Okay, all right, you know, no, maybe this isn't, you know, the job for you, you know, sorry, we appreciate your work, but, you know, proper work-life balance, learning how to keep to a schedule, you know, is something. It's something that I did when I was in college, and it's an important skill for students to learn. So once there was a little bit of bumps in the road when we had tried to keep students to schedule, but for the most part, it was fine. The next thing that we did was just a rudimentary start on documentation, just the absolute basics. How to check books in and out in Iliad, in Alma, which is our ILS system, and how to just do basic things. I put in a little screen capture of kind of just the little rudimentary scheduling or screen capture that we did. And you can kind of see it's not anything in like Canva or anything. It was just pretty much a Word document where I was using MS Paint to kind of like paint in arrows just to kind of get something down on paper. So we had something to give the students that wasn't nothing that they could refer to. Slide. Then the pandemic happened. Everything, our plans went, you know, flying out the window. Our resource sharing department went down to 3 full-time staff and 1 part-time employee, including the loss of our entire lending team. We were not allowed student workers, even remotely. And by default, we had to launch a scan and deliver service. That was something that I had proposed pre-pandemic, and admin had shot it down. They'd kind of said, if students, you know, want books and articles, they can come into the library and get them. We don't really need to be doing that work for them. Clearly, once the pandemic happened, that couldn't be the plan anymore. So we launched Scan and Deliver, you know, at the drop of a hat, and immediately saw 100% plus increase in demand for our services, 103% to be exact during those months. Which all this led to the added challenge of how to effectively flesh out and implement development of student staff, given this new challenge with the pandemic, with, you know, over half our department is gone. We're not, eventually we'll be allowed to have students back, and we're getting tons of more business, even on the lending side as well. So huge challenges were going on during the pandemic. Slide. So finally, fall 2021 happened. We were granted permission even during Vanderbilt's hiring freeze during the pandemic. We were given permission to hire 2 new positions. I was able to entice Miriam in from Seattle to bring her in to be the assistant manager here. Initially, we had Jessica Martin as our lending coordinator. She about a year later got her absolute dream job as a public librarian in Nashville Public Library. And she's doing very well now. We were sad to see her go. But now we were able to bring in Bailey Scoggin, who we're also really excited about. She was working in circulation at the time, and we were able to entice her down from circulation, which we're really happy about. And now that there were people that meant that we could start innovating and start working on our practices and procedures, especially once we were allowed to hire, student employees. One of the things that I had bought pre-pandemic was kind of like a blank whiteboard. And I thought we could do some strategizing and for students and kind of, get some planning and kind of scheduling for the day set out on this board, but I really don't know how to do it. And I don't really have time to think about it too hard. And I don't have staff yet. So it was just a big challenge. So now that we had all these people on board, it was just kind of like, all right, I've got these ideas. I'm going to empower you guys because empowered full-time employees lead to empowered student employees. I'm going to empower you guys to work on this and have at it, go to work. So at that point, I'm going to turn it over to Miriam.
Thank you, Robin. And I prefer to talk with my video off, but I wanted to say hello to everyone first. So thank you. So as Robin commented, I was brought in, I was hired in December of 2020. And so I got my feet wet right before the holidays. And in January, we did actually have that spring semester of 2021. We had 4 student workers, and of those 4 student workers, they were all hired before the pandemic. They were not allowed to work at the same time. And 3 of them were graduating in that June. So we had 1 left over. So by that summer, we were greenlit for hiring student employees for the first time since January of 2020. So the few months before the pandemic and before I was hired. And I had to learn how to post a job opening in our campus hiring program called Hire a Door. And we're called the Commodores. That's where door comes from. And I had to, and we also had to think about what type of questions we would ask in an interview. And what does student hiring even look like in a endemic world when nobody had done it in 1.5 years? All of our interviews were conducted via Zoom, and they still are even now, so that students are able to fit the interview into their schedules wherever they may be. So it could be if they're on campus, if they're still at home at the beginning of before the school year starts. We've done an interview from the backseat of somebody's car. So that's, and students are also provided the questions ahead of time to assist with language barriers and ADA purposes. For our interview questions, I took the questions Robin had been using during her first interviews that she had created before the pandemic, and added some of my own. For the purpose of this presentation, I want to highlight one of our 10 questions, which is the 3rd one on the screen here. Which is, we recognize that life happens. What, in your opinion, is an acceptable situation for calling out, aka dropping a shift or canceling? And what is an unacceptable excuse? The other 2 are also important to us. And if you would like to view all of the questions, we will make sure to include them when our slides are posted after the session. Our interview questions are based on our department environment and often have a story with each one. Our interviews last 45 minutes to an hour. And I'm highlighting this particular question about when it's acceptable to call out and when it's not, because the reasons for calling out have changed in the endemic post-pandemic world. Well, this has always been a part of the interview process in our department, and it was on Robin's questions in that case. In the post-pandemic environment, this is when we discuss the topic of mental health. I saw it in the spring of 2021, how much the pandemic was really affecting not just myself, but also our student employees. And many students in the interview will mention illness and family emergencies as being acceptable reasons to call out. But during this endemic phase of COVID, it's become clear that mental health should not be ignored. We also talk about if we see patterns and dropped shifts, we will discuss schedule changes. And if we don't hear from a student for 2 weeks, we'll fill out a student concern form with the school to check on them. Part of our interviewing and onboarding is to provide a sense of inclusivity as well. Outside of reminding students that mental health is important, we start our interviews with our pronouns and ask for theirs and their preferred name. After hiring, we then confirm and note any food and environmental sensitivities. This allows us to make sure we always have appropriate snacks for all of our students. We also ask about religious accommodations. This can mean anything from making sure observant Jewish students don't have a shift after sundown on Fridays, to being aware that Muslim students may need to pray mid-shift, or being aware that a student may need to take Good Friday off in the spring. While this is not something you would do in a traditional workplace, many students have not learned to speak up about this need in the workplace. I know I hadn't at 18 or 19 years old. Our way of saying something at onboarding is a way of saying, if you need something later, tell us. We may not always ask, and a future employer won't ask. Next slide. After interviewing and hiring, we move on to documentation and training. Our documentation, so all of our documentation for student tasks are written, but all of them contain the visuals. Our visuals are usually screen captures or pictures that we've actually taken and then put into the documentation. They include directions. All of our directions and images are colorblind friendly whenever possible. So that means if it is telling you to go click on the borrowing string, it's not just an arrow up at the borrowing string and an arrow down at the transaction string. You can tell from our images, we use Iliad. But it's going to be an orange arrow one place and a purple oval or a yellow star. It's going to be very descriptive of where you're looking. This helps for being colorblind, but also if you're a person who just has a hard time finding things on a page, it's just very helpful in moving around. We also make sure that anywhere on the page, if we have a warning, a reminder, or tips and tricks, there's a big box around it that is to remind you, to give you an idea of how to do things. Also for our training, instead of it being the world of telephone, we make sure every time a student does a new task, it is done with a staff partner. So if I'm training a student on borrowing returns, I'm doing it with them. Bailey, as our lending coordinator, walks through lending returns. If we're doing scanning, there's always somebody sitting there right with them, getting them doing scanning for the first time. If we're doing faculty delivery, myself or Robin are out there the first time. We have 2 campuses we do delivery to. So usually the first time it's with Robin or myself. And then if the student is delivering to the other campus for the first time, that is a case where they are maybe buddy training, where we do send them out with another student. But that is so that they've already done it once. They're just learning their way around the campus with another student. Slide. And this is actually going back to Robin talking about that whiteboard that she got all that long ago. Before I even got to Vanderbilt, this is what we did with it. So this was a innovation that I started actually with Jessica Martin before she ran off to do her dream job. we came up with this priority board. These are actually business card magnets that we added on all of the tasks that we have in our office. And we also have a card for each name that one of our students has. On the card is the student name and their pronouns. So we can make sure that the students use the appropriate pronouns between each other. That is done with the permission from the students. And when students arrive, the students can see what tasks we have. And as staff, we put them in the order that we feel they need to be done in that day. But students do have the self-agency to claim what they would like to do. Like, so if a student has stepped wrong, or isn't feeling well enough to like walk the 2 miles that day for doing faculty delivery or pulling from another campus library. I say 2 miles, but that's a slight exaggeration. They can choose to stay in the office that day. But it's really an opportunity for students to be able to say, I'm doing this today. And then if another student comes in, we know that 2 students aren't doing the same thing. It's an excellent also if there's an emergency either in our building or in another building, or if there's a tornado warning that goes off, we're able to message students and let them know, please make sure you stay in place where you are. So this was a great thing that we keep going, and we keep it up on the building, on the wall, even though we recently moved and it's currently propped up against some shelves in the office right now, but it's a great little tool of ours. And on that note, I will turn the presentation over to Bailey.
Hello, everyone. I'll do my best to move through this quickly since I know we're a little bit over on time. I'm going to be talking about some of the in-office practices that we use to best communicate with and empower our student workers. As Miriam references, we do live in the tornado belt just a bit, so we like to be very available for our students, both in the case of an emergency, as well as just in the case of questions. One of the things that we emphasize, not just in having 10 questions on our interview process, but in terms of practice, is to really make ourselves available for student workers. One of the things I like to reiterate is that I am endeavoring to equip you with the tools to succeed in this job. And one of the ways that we do this is by answering any and all questions you can possibly think of. We went through a few different methods to best do this, especially in the early days when we were sort of scrambling to hire student workers. Text messages were somewhat effective in terms of communication, but we had a lot of situations where a student would only include one supervisor, so they weren't accessing the full pool of information that we have available with all of the supervisors together. So we sent out a poll at the end of our first year with student workers, listing a few of the different communication applications that there are, and the least reviled option, and the one with which I was the most familiar, was GroupMe, which is to say that there was no additional comment that they absolutely hate GroupMe. So that was the one we went with. And as you can see here in our snippet, each student worker has a chat created with them and the supervisors. So it's the student and then the 3 main supervisors that they work with on a day-to-day basis, so that any situation that they need to communicate with one supervisor on automatically CCs all of the other supervisors. In addition to having that via email, the text communication or having it open on a desktop is a really efficient and effective way to communicate. We also keep the RSS group chat both for announcing yummy snacks in the office, but also for student workers to advertise events that they're doing, to mention that they're dropping a shift, to ask questions to the general chat, to send squirrel memes in recent history, because Vanderbilt has a rabid squirrel population, rabid in the sense of powerful, not in the sense of rabidity. So we use GroupMe a lot in terms of our kind of day-to-day communication as our application. We also have digitized our department organization using one of the applications of LibApps, which is LibStaffer. It's something that I had experience with in previous institutions and was really excited had been instituted here when I came on board. This is something that allows us to break out a calendar on each week and assign different slots to students, as well as giving them the opportunity to track their schedule, but also to drop and claim shifts within that window, which is really efficient in kind of a real-time update of dropped shifts up until a certain window before their shift and claimed shifts. It also has a large-scale communication feature using emails that allows us to contact all of our student workers at once, as well as to remind them, especially at the beginning of the semester as we are on, of the shifts that they are assigned for a week or that they have coming up. So the empowerment isn't just a buzzword that we've included in this presentation. It's also something that we all hold very close to our hearts. And empowerment in this context includes modeling a healthy work environment for our student workers, and by that, teaching self-advocacy and showing up. So by modeling a healthy work environment, we start in the questions. We are very clear, we are very communicative in why we are asking things. We are very clear in demonstrating that something that we ask them to do is something that we will be doing or have done ourselves. And really just valuing them as an individual, not just as a means to an end in terms of completing tasks. So this includes communicating about mental health, making sure that they understand that their quality of life is a priority for us, not just their quality of work, and the ways in which we can work together to do that. It also involves teaching that self-advocacy, particularly for our students who are members of the LGBTQ+ community, who have religious requirements, such as our Muslim student workers, or of course, much of our office is Jewish, so particularly with Rosh Hashanah finishing up and another holiday coming up, really communicating about how their scheduling changes might adjust, or how best as employers we can accommodate their accommodations, if you will. Most of our student workers are very surprised by this, unfortunately, in part because, as Miriam says, when you're an undergraduate, you are an adult, but you are still quite young and quite fresh to the world. So we really want to reinforce in a positive environment our student workers' abilities to mention their needs, both religious and cultural, as well as in terms of when they aren't feeling well, when they have specific accommodations that they need from a health perspective, more even than just a sprained ankle, and really being able to take that in this sort of concise environment and apply it to their classes, to other work situations, to internships, which is something that they've been very vocal, has been useful in doing. We've had students in internships who have talked about their ability to advocate for their needs medically, to advocate for their needs in terms of communication, that this has really built up that kind of muscle for them to be able to utilize it in a real world scenario. The same is true of our students who need religious accommodations, who have become much more empowered and much more comfortable communicating these needs in the context that they are needs. It's not just something extraneous that they would kind of like to have accommodated to other employers over the summer, to teachers, to internships, as I've mentioned. So really being able to take this framework that we've created of really open communication, of really complete value of our students, and being able to apply it to scenarios that might not have quite that opening attitude towards them, but still be able to accommodate their needs. Additionally, we're very passionate about showing up. One of the things we warn our student workers about when they come into their office is that we will be overbearing and we will try to feed them within their boundaries because we were very respectful of that. And some of that is as small as making sure there are halal and gluten-free snacks for our students who are halal or who can't have gluten. And some of that is as large as really trying to make the time to attend the events that they invite us to. As you can see here, there's a picture of Miriam and myself at a Muslim Students Association event with two of our ILL staffs, one of whom was an organizer. And in addition to using our group messaging to advertise this event, she went out of her way to invite us. And so, of course, that's basically a guarantee that we need to be able to show up to really reiterate that we value our students, again, not just in the context of student work, but in the context of how their lives are going, what they're passionate about. Even if it isn't all about interlibrary loan, we really want to connect with them and hear from them and make sure that they're fulfilling their best needs and that we're making that possible. So the future, again, I know we're a little tight on time, so I'll go through this pretty quickly. I view it in kind of three contexts: the continual, the foundational, and the aspirational. The continual are things that we're doing already, but that we really want to reinforce. So ongoing literature consumption, we've really dug into things that are about equity, about racial equality in particular, and being very conscious of our student workers without just the framework of this office, and wanting to be respectful of their needs and their experiences. Miriam and I are both very involved in different groups on campus, all of which are ultimately tied back to EDI, which is equity, diversity, and involvement. And so that's something that we really try to bring into the office as well. The same is true of student involvement. So just really connecting with student groups, with our students themselves, and using these connections to expand both our students' experience in our office, but also our office's connection with student groups on campus. Foundational are things that I think would be really significant and that could be done with not too much of a stretch. And one of those that I think is really important is expanding student advertising. In this way, right now we use a student job board, which is quite effective because we get a lot of applications. But I really think it's important for us to reach beyond just the students that utilize that particular job board, and to reach out with student groups on campus, particularly multicultural or underutilized, underrepresented, excuse me, I knew that word was wrong, underrepresented communities, just to make sure that we are reaching them as a resource, but also that they are comfortable approaching our office for possible employment, but also for services, and really just reiterating kind of that connection on campus. Aspirational is something that I dream about as I fall asleep at night, which is ongoing job tailoring to better associate our students' experiences with our office. I think that's something that we could really expand on, so that they are able to better tailor their experience beyond just our standard sort of job needs into the larger scale of things that will really help them on resumes and in job building. I see that my chat is going, so I'm going to check it. Okie dokie. So going on, having talked for quite some time, thank you to those of you who have bared with us. Thank you so much for attending this talk. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you for listening to this group of people who care far, far too much about their students. Please enjoy this thank you swirl taken from a true life representation on campus by one of our incredibly talented in-office students. He is spectacular. He is not going into the arts. We can't believe it, but we're thrilled to have him in our office.
Right.
And then
thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, go ahead and yeah, talk about your contact info for sure.
This is going to hear from Robin really quick.
Yeah, just wrapping up. There's a picture of us having ice cream across the street at Saraba's. There are plenty of people in the room who knows if you come out and visit us in Nashville, we will take you out for ice cream. So please come out. One of the mottos in the office is it's important to have fun, and we like to do that. So yeah, come out and see us, hang out.
I always like to say, and I also like to say, we took a student worker out for ice cream as well. That picture is taken by that student worker.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. We need to wrap up, and I'm so sorry we didn't get to the Q&A, but our presenters can go back into the Q&A later and answer, so definitely check back. Thank you so much to our presenters and all of you who attended this session, and thank you for staying over if you stayed longer. Please fill out the post-session survey. The link can be found on the conference front page and in the Whoova chat. And then additionally, if you have enjoyed the session and want to continue the conversation, you can continue to use the chat within this session or move over to the community section of Whoova, where you can use the chat boards or create a virtual meetup. Have a great rest of the day, and we will see you all tomorrow.